Next, Your Honor, the defense calls Mr. Richard Merritt to the stand.
Sir, raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony presented in the court today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, sir?
I do.
State your name, Mr. Merritt.
Richard Vincent Merritt.
And Mr. Merritt, where were you born?
Fort Belvoir, Virginia.
And did you grow up in Virginia?
Well, initially, for the first 3 years of my life there, my father was in the Air Force. He was career Air Force. He actually retired as a bird colonel after 24 years of service. But at the time I was born, we were stationed there. I believe it was at the Pentagon. We stayed there for about 3 years. When I was 3 years old, we moved to Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. Stayed there for another 3 years and went back to D.C., where we stayed until I was 13 when my father retired. And at that point, he took a job with McDonnell Douglas, which back then was one of the world's largest military aircraft manufacturers. We went and lived overseas in Saudi Arabia for 2 years. At that time, you could not attend school past the 9th grade in Saudi Arabia, so I came back and actually went my sophomore year at the Paideia School here in DeKalb County. And then my dad was transferred to St. Louis, to company headquarters, where I spent my junior and senior year of high school. So I moved around a lot.
What's your father's name?
He went by Ken, but his full name was Robert Kenneth Merritt.
And when did your father pass?
He passed away in November of 2000.
And obviously, your mother's name was?
Shirley.
Do you have a brother?
I do.
And what's your brother's name?
Robert Kenneth Merritt II.
And is there an age gap between the two of you?
About 9 years.
Who's older, who's younger?
My brother would be the older one.
Now, growing up, what was the dynamics of the family? Was it just the four of you?
It was just the four of us. As I just mentioned, we moved around a lot. That was primarily when my brother had already gone off to college. He was in college by the time I was 3rd or 4th grade. So, but the dynamic when he was still around or came to visit was, we had a very traditional, conservative Southern military household. My father was, as I said, career military. He went on to be a successful businessman. My mother sold real estate, was very good at it with her personality and natural intelligence. She was a star at it. And, my brother and I, we got along. My father definitely ruled the roost. He was the boss, but my mother certainly had her say too. It was definitely a partnership.
Now, when did you guys move to 1590 Planters Road?
My parents bought that house in the summer of 1993. That would have been the end of my freshman year at the University of Georgia.
Now, is that where you went for undergrad?
Yes, I went to UGA.
And did you graduate from UGA?
I did.
What did you major?
I was a double major in English and political science, basically pre-law.
And did you go to law school?
I did.
And where did you go to law school?
I went to law school at Mississippi College School of Law in Jackson, Mississippi.
Now, while you were in undergrad, did you meet a certain lady?
I met a certain lady. Her name was Janine Minicozy. I met Janine when she was a freshman and I was a junior. I'm about a year and a half, maybe a little bit more than a year and a half older than her. But we met through we met through a mutual friend.
And how long did you date before you got married?
Well, early on, we dated off and on as kids do at Georgia, just enjoying the scene there in Athens. But as I proceeded into my senior year, it was, I guess, spring quarter of my senior year, getting ready to graduate, we became more serious and decided we wanted to stay in a committed relationship.
Now, by the time, what year did you get married?
We got married in 1999, about a week after I graduated law school.
And during that time, was she a veterinarian yet?
No, I believe she started her first year of vet school, either my second or third year of law school, because she was still had a couple years to go when I graduated law school.
Now, by this time, when you got married, was your father still around?
Yes, he was. 2000, about a year after we got married.
So during this time, did your mom help you out?
Yeah, they both did. At the time, I took me 3 attempts past the bar. I passed it the 3rd time. I failed the first 2 times. I did thankfully have a job as a project manager with a local internet company, so I didn't have the pressure of needing the license, although it certainly would have been nice to get that under my belt right away. But yeah, there were times when my parents helped us here and there while she was still in school, sure.
Now, after your father passed, what was the relationship between you and your mother?
Well, after my dad died, it was, as you can imagine, just my brother and I and our immediate family. We are close to a lot of extended family, had a lot of close friends. But in terms of our family, it was obviously just my brother, mom, and I, and we were close.
So what year did you and Janine get married?
1999.
And did the two of you have kids?
Yes.
And who are the kids?
The firstborn is our son, Jack, and our secondborn is our daughter, Mia.
Now, Jack, you've heard a little bit about him. Were you involved in his life?
Absolutely. Jack was the kind of son that every father wants to have. He was smart. He was a sensitive kid. He was creative. He was handsome. He was athletic. He was everything you wanted somebody to be. Just a real strong, special child. And he was my pal. I mean, we did everything at an early age. We went fishing. When he got older, we played a lot of golf. We went on trips, father-son trips. We went on trips with other dads and their sons that we were friends with. I went to all of his school activities, helped coach his baseball team, helped out with football. As I said, it was those big things that brought us closer, but it was the little things as well. Just going to Target or hopping in the truck and going for a drive, or things of that nature as well.
Now, Mia, I understand she has a disability. What's her disability?
Yes, Mia has cerebral palsy, and we did not know that she had a disability until she's about a year or so old. She was not reaching her milestones as the pediatrician wanted her to, and upon further testing, they realized that she had a form of cerebral palsy.
So did you and your wife have to put her in programs or anything?
Yes, I mean, she required special schooling, special therapies. As she got older, she required speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. She had a walker and a wheelchair at a young age, and obviously as she grew bigger and taller and stronger, she had bigger walkers and bigger wheelchairs. But she's always going to require the aid of one of those devices and always going to require therapy. She's had a couple surgeries to help her perhaps walk better. She can't walk without the aid of a walker, and her speech is slurred and her development is delayed.
Now, were you involved with her therapies and in progress along with your wife?
Yes, as much as I could be. I mean, when I opened my firm in 2002, as you can imagine, is extremely busy. I was running my cases, trying to get new clients, attending court. It was just me to start off with. So those early years, I couldn't be at every single thing. That was the case when I was at a large firm before I opened up my own firm. So I went to everything I reasonably could, but certainly I couldn't be at everything. But the things I couldn't attend, we certainly talked about after the fact, because I wanted to be involved in her life.
And you mentioned your practice. What type of law did you practice?
Well, in 2010, I opened up my own law firm, and before that I had been at a large law firm in Buckhead, but I've always been a litigator, primarily civil litigation, mainly personal injury, wrongful death, medical malpractice, and business litigation. When I opened up my own firm, I also did a little bit of criminal defense. I really didn't do felony work. I did a lot of DUIs, things of that nature.
Now, during this time, around 2010, and as the practice grew, what type of lifestyle were you and Janine leading?
When the firm opened in 2010? Well, we were a very sociable couple. We lived in a very diverse neighborhood in Smyrna, within walking distance to downtown Smyrna, where a lot of the restaurants and whatnot were at. The neighborhood was primarily people like us, two professionals, small kids, so there were a lot of children the same age as our children's ages. We got together for barbecues. We went to events together. We had each other over at each other's houses. There were a lot of sleepovers for the kids. Kids played baseball together in the local Smyrna Little League. So there was always something going on, whether it was a neighborhood event or going to some sort of lawyer event or an event associated with her veterinary practice. We were out and about.
Now, by this time, your father's passing, did anyone else live at 1590 Planters Road besides your mother?
No.
And up until her death, did anyone else live there besides you?
No.
Now, during this time, 2010, 2015, what was your relationship with your kids and your wife?
In 2010?
2010 to 2015. How was the family dynamic?
The only way to describe my family dynamic and my marriage was it was a dream. We were happy. We were fun-loving. We laughed a lot. You know, Janine and I did a fair amount of traveling. We were always doing things with the children. We didn't like to sit around and watch TV. We weren't that type of couple. We weren't sedentary by any means. I was always trying to promote her career, and she was promoting mine. A lot of times we'd find out that we had clients in common and didn't even know it. And it was just a very idyllic way to live, to be married and to raise kids, to be in a place that you enjoyed, around people you enjoyed, and to be building something, to be building a future.
Now, in 2018, what happened?
In 2018, I was arrested in Cobb County for multiple counts of theft, forgery, and there were some counts also of elder exploitation because I did steal money from some elderly folks.
Now, your arrest, was that a big deal in Cobb County?
Yes, it was a big deal in Cobb County. Just a little bit of background. I was one of the few lawyers in Smyrna, and Smyrna has grown a lot since I started my practice in 2010, but it was right on the little village square across from the courthouse. I was the only firm there. That was part of why I picked that area, because I saw a need. I wanted to be the local lawyer that people went to first for help. And it was a very successful vision. And so the practice grew. And when things went south quickly and I got arrested several years later in 2018, it was a shock to our neighbors, the local community, and to the Cobb County Bar.
Now, when you got arrested, how many times did you get arrested?
Actually, the first time I got arrested in connection with the Cobb County fraud was in April of 2017. It was shortly after spring break that year. We had just gotten back, and I had a letter from the Cobb County Magistrate Court telling me that I needed to appear at a warrant application hearing. And what that basically means is somebody has taken out a warrant for your arrest, and a judge has to determine if there's probable cause or not. So this hearing was on a Monday morning, and I went to the hearing. It happened to be two of the older ladies who were victims in the main arrest in January of 2018. They had taken out a warrant for one account of theft by conversion, alleging I'd stolen $70,000 of their settlement money. We had the hearing, and the judge found that there was probable cause. So the judge said, well, I'm going to set your bond at $2,000, and I will give you until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to appear at the Cobb County Jail. I left court. When I saw Janine that night, I told her, as soon as I saw her, after the kids were in bed, I said, I need to tell you something. She said, what? I said, I have a warrant for my arrest. And I explained to her what it was. I said, I don't know the extent of it. I know they're claiming I stole $70,000. Need to figure out more about it. But in the meantime, I need to appear at the Cobb County Jail tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And so the next morning, she went with me early to James Bond Bonding Company, one of the bonding companies up there off of County Services Road. And we filled out the bond paperwork. She was the surety on the bond and paid the $200 some odd down, which is the 10% of the $2,000. And I turned myself into the Cobb County Jail shortly before 9 o'clock and was out by 2 o'clock that afternoon.
So the first time she bonded you up?
Correct. Janine knew that I had been accused of a felony theft. She knew that I had booked in and out of the Cobb County Jail, and that was the last we ever discussed it until I was arrested along with everybody else, all the other victims, I should say, in January of 2018.
So the second time, did she provide any assistance to get you out of jail?
No, she did not. To say she was less than pleased would be a vast understatement. I was driving to deliver papers to somebody the morning of January 31st, 2018. Several months earlier, I had voluntarily surrendered my bar license. The bar had been investigating this. I knew what was coming, and it was just odd to me that I had never received an invitation from a detective to talk about it or anything like that. They just built their case, and then wham, there it was. So that's how they chose to proceed. But I was arrested on January 31st. I was, as I said, going to deliver some papers. A Cobb County Sheriff's Deputy SUV pulled up behind me, blue lighted me. I pulled over in a Taco Bell parking lot, and several unmarked Crown Vics appeared as well. I didn't learn until several hours later the scope and extent of what I was being charged with. I reached out to her from the jail. I knew based on my experience as a lawyer that I would not be bonding out in the next few weeks, and sure enough, did not have a formal bond hearing before a Superior Court judge until about 2 weeks later. But Janine was very upset, didn't understand what was going on, which is certainly understandable. I frankly didn't know the extent of what was going on, although I had a pretty good idea. And that was her reaction at the beginning of that whole process.
So that case, how many victims were there?
There were 15 victims and 34 felony counts.
And you mentioned, how long did you sit in jail waiting to go to court?
It's about 2 weeks, maybe a little less.
And did you end up having to hire a lawyer on that case?
I did.
And who was your lawyer?
David Willingham.
And were you able to pay him, or did somebody else pay him?
At that time, funds were extremely tight and limited. I was in the Cobb County Jail. Janine was scrambling to try to make sense of what was going on and take care of the children. So my mother graciously offered to assist with his initial fee payment.
And what was your mother's general demeanor and feelings at this time?
My mother was upset. She was disappointed. She raised me better than that. And she had every right to be upset with me. It was a disgrace. And there's no excuse for my behavior. But she was upset. But at the same time, I was her son. She truly did believe that one should hear out all sides of a situation before making an opinion. And she gave me the benefit of the doubt. And her goal was to help me get out, and then I would get a very stern talking to once out. But her goal at the time was just to support me and try to help me get up the bond money.
How much was your bond?
The bond was $400,000. The down payment for the bond in order to actually get me out was 10%, so that would have been $40,000.
How was that?
My mother, it took about 2 months, but what she ended up doing was taking out a home equity line of credit, basically a second mortgage on her home, in order to come up with the $40,000.
So ultimately, how much time lapsed between your getting a bond and getting out of jail?
I believe it was about 65 or 66 days.
And what were the conditions of your bond?
Well, The bond conditions were as follows. I was to have a curfew of 5 p.m. to 8 a.m., which meant obviously I had to be back at her address. I had to live at her address, first of all. That was the first bond condition. Second condition was I had a curfew of, as I mentioned, 5 p.m. to 9 a.m. So I had to be back by 5 p.m. and I couldn't leave the next morning till, it was 8 a.m., 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. Obviously, I had to reside at her home in 1590 Planters Row in Stone Mountain, DeKalb County. I wasn't to drink any alcohol, do any drugs without a prescription, not to break any laws of the state of Georgia, pretty standard stuff. They also had me surrender my passport within the first 24 hours of release, which I did, and I was required to wear an ankle monitor.
Now, once you were released, what was the relationship between you and your wife?
It was very contentious. She felt that I had led a double life. She didn't understand why I took money from these people. She was upset. She was shocked. We went from having an idyllic life to having nothing. Despite my urges to try, it was decided that she didn't want to stay in the home, so we let the house go. It was a very nice house that we loved and had lived in and raised our children in and planned to stay in a long time. So the house was gone. She decided to move into a rental home in East Cobb and Marietta, where the public schools are quite good. And my son had attended the Lovett School, which is a private school, but he wasn't going to be able to go there anymore. My daughter went to public school because of her disability, so thankfully she could attend school wherever she wanted, based on having a disability. But it was a major upheaval. I mean, overnight it was as if a bomb went off in our lives.
And at some point in time, did she file for divorce?
Very quickly, she filed for divorce 4 days into my arrest.
And did that divorce ultimately, was it complete?
Yes, the divorce was finalized, I believe, third week of June 2018. And I didn't fight her on the divorce. I understood her emotions. I understood the reasons for it. I certainly didn't want her to be accused of having any part of my misdeeds, because I truly did act alone. She wasn't involved. I think early on some folks may not have believed that, but it turned out that the divorce not only was what she wanted emotionally, but perhaps helped out in segregating, my behavior from, obviously her not having an involvement.
Now, after your release, what was your relationship with your kids?
My son was 14 and a half at the time, and as I said, we were very close, and he had me up on a pedestal like a lot of boys do their father, and he was upset with me. He yelled at me, he ignored me, he cried, he was hurting.
There's no relevance to his kids' feelings.
We've heard from Dr. Minacosi, and she went into detail about the things that the son felt, things that the son did, and things the son told her during this time period.
But that doesn't make it relevant. So how is this relevant?
Judge, I'm involved.
Okay.
But your mother, by this time you're living with your mother,
Yes,
and you're out of jail.
correct.
What was your relationship with her?
She wasn't pleased with my behavior. She was embarrassed, but at the same time, she was willing to give me a chance, give me a place to live, help me survive. I mean, I really didn't have much other than my personal effects and an old pickup truck, literally. So she opened up her home to me, and it was strange being back under her roof at, I guess I was 44 years old when all this went down. But it after the first several days and weeks, we got into a routine, and it was fairly normal under the circumstances.
Did you and your mother argue, fight?
My mother's a very strong-willed person. I believe the term firecracker was used, and that is a very good term. I would throw another one out there. She's a steel magnolia. My mother is a strong Southern woman, and she had no problem telling me what I thought, what she thought, rather, down to what I wore, to my opinions on certain things. But it was certainly not toxic. We were both opinionated people. We spoke our minds. But we also laughed a lot and spent a lot of time together. So there's nothing abnormal to me or her about it.
Now, as your criminal case made its way through the process, did you start to feel some external pressures?
You mean as we got closer to sentencing? Yes, it was a very odd time. Starting in, I would say, right around the 1st of January 2019, my sentencing hearing had been set way back in September of 2018. I actually wanted to plea earlier and get on with it and get on down the road to prison, but the DA at the time in Cobb County wasn't ready yet. He wanted to make sure there weren't any more victims, which was fine. It's certainly his prerogative. So there weren't any more victims, and then the plea date was set for September. In September, the plea date was set for January 18th of 2019, a Friday. And right about the 1st of January 2019, my mother's house kind of sits up on a cul-de-sac, and you can see the whole cul-de-sac. And I saw an abnormal amount of cars pulling slowly through, stopping in front of our home. My mother noticed the same thing. I began receiving hang-ups on my cell phone, numbers I didn't recognize. Some said unknown number, but area codes of numbers I didn't know. My mother was receiving the same thing. She showed me her phone, wanting to know if I knew who these numbers were, and I didn't. And this seemed to go on with some frequency up until January 14th of 2019.
Now, during this time, were you speaking with your wife?
Yes, of course.
And likewise, does she have concerns?
I believe, if I recall correctly, she did. The victims in this case have been characterized, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, I'm just trying to answer truthfully and honestly. The victims have been characterized as...
Objection, Your Honor. What the victims have been characterized as is not relevant. I don't know if that's hearsay or where he's coming up with this, but I don't believe that that's relevant.
And they're not victims in this case. There's
No.
one victim in this case.
Correct.
So how is this testimony relevant?
I'll move forward.
All right. I'll sustain the objection.
Now, were you ever... you were followed?
Yes.
And did you ever feel that maybe somebody was out to get you?
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
Now let's talk about, at some point in time, as we've seen, 2001, a cartoon arrived.
Yes.
And what day was that?
That was January 14th, 2019.
And who received that cartoon?
That cartoon was received at my mother's home at Planters Row in DeKalb County. It was personally delivered in her mailbox and discovered by her.
Did you have discussions with her about it?
Right away. I believe, on my way to work. I was working at a warehouse at the time, and I received a call from her informing me of receipt of this cartoon, and she was upset. And literally, as I hung up with her, I received a call from my ex-wife, Janine, who you've heard from, and she was upset. And what was concerning to me, because it was directed at me as well, not only in the substance of the cartoon, but obviously had to deal with something I was involved in Cobb County. What concerned me was that these are copies of the same cartoon being delivered 40 miles apart, 2 different counties, with a county or two in between these counties. And it was a concerted effort, whoever delivered them.
Now, within a day or so, what happened to your mother?
Well, actually, it started the night that she received the cartoon. I got back, and she was upset. She started feeling dizzy, having difficulty breathing, having chest pain, and she just was very concerned about the cartoon, about the effect on Janine and the kids. And I should add that Janine felt as if, she didn't feel. She was quite adamant that she was keeping my son Jack home from school the next day, and she wasn't going to go to work. And she had called somebody at the Cobb County DA's office or sheriff's office, and I'm not sure which, to inform them of it. And my mother was concerned that they weren't going to do anything, and in fact they didn't. So there was definitely concern on both sides. My mother had these symptoms. She decided that she needed to go to the ER. Well, I had the ankle monitor on, and the curfew had been moved back to midnight because I had started a job at Petco Warehouse up in Gwinnett County, and in order to make my hours, I had to be able to get the curfew moved back, which my pretrial officer, basically my probation officer, was happy to do because they want you to have a job. So long story short, I wasn't still going to be able to drive her because my mother really didn't make the decision to go to the hospital until probably 10:30, 11 that night. There's no way I could take her there, drop her off, and get back and not be in violation of my monitor. So she was able to drive herself. They admitted her, and I think she was admitted at early morning hours of the 15th, and she was discharged sometimes on the 16th.
Now, after she was discharged, did your mom still have concerns?
It was all we talked about. She got back home that Wednesday when I first encountered her. I remember distinctly sitting at the kitchen table. We were a kitchen table family, so discussions were had at the kitchen table or around the kitchen counter around the island where the sink was. So we talked about it. And back a few days earlier on Monday, I had taken a picture of the cartoon on my phone and sent it to my lawyer, David Willingham, so he was aware. And if I'm not mistaken, he received a copy as well as something else.
That's speculative hearsay. I don't know that he has personal knowledge of this.
And Mr. Queen, this is turning into a lot of narrative. So you need to either ask some specific questions or instruct your client to confine his answers to the questions that are asked. So I'll sustain the objection.
Yes, ma'am. So, what did your mother do in response to the cartoon as it relates to the attorney, Mr. Willingham?
She began to draft a letter to Mr. Willingham.
And to your knowledge, was that letter delivered?
To my knowledge, it was.
On what day was this? What day? What was January 15, 16, 17? What day are we?
I remember her showing me a draft of the letter quite soon after she got home because my mother was the type of person to handle stuff while it was fresh on her mind. So she showed me a draft of it. I said, do whatever you want, send it. And I have no reason to think that's not what happened, and it did in fact happen.
Now, what day was your sentencing hearing?
Friday the 18th.
And how did that go?
It was quite an event. Court that day was to start at 9 a.m. and it lasted all day.
Did you ever plea on that day?
I did.
Did the victim get an opportunity to express their opinions regarding your sentence on that?
They certainly did. And the way it worked that day is I showed up and entered my plea, but there had not been an agreement on the precise sentencing. I rejected the state's initial offer. The judge assured us that he would not go more serious than that offer. So the hope was maybe I would end up getting a little less time than what the state initially recommended. The judge heard testimony from the victims all day. I believe I was the final person to testify. And then the judge pronounced his sentence 4:35 in the afternoon.
Now, you say you testified. Was it a trial?
No, it was not a trial. I pled guilty in the first few minutes of the proceeding. The rest of the day was simply about the judge hearing from victims, hearing from me, and making a decision on what he wanted the sentence to be. There was no question about my guilt at any point.
And what was the sentence?
The sentence was 30 to 15. Plus, I had to pay back $526,000 in restitution.
Now, did you go to jail that day?
No, I did not.
When will you report to the jail?
The judge was gracious enough to give me 2 weeks to report, which would be February 1st by 5 p.m. at the Cobb County Jail. And he made it abundantly clear what would happen if I did not show up.
What would happen if you didn't show up?
If I did not show up, he would revoke my sentence, and it would be a serve 30 sentence, which could affect parole and all sorts of other things. So the sentence would be much harsher if I did not appear as scheduled and ordered.
So after sentencing, what did you do during this period of time between sentencing and the day you were supposed to show up?
Well, that day, just starting off with how it was handled. I mean, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't upset. I accepted my punishment, and my mother and I got in the car and we left and went back to her house in Stone Mountain. That weekend, we kept the kids. I spent time with my children like I did a lot of the weekends during my 10 months out on bond. They wanted to see me. I wanted to see them.
So did you have an opportunity to spend time with the kids while you were on bond, even after you took your plea?
Absolutely. That was an area where Janine and I were thankfully in agreement. She made it clear to me, both in and out of the Cobb County Jail during that 60 days I was trying to make bond. She said, if the kids want to see you, I have no problem with you seeing them. And I saw them above and beyond the former divorce settlement agreement. There are many times that I kept them while she did things with her friends, and there really weren't any issues. We communicated, and if I wanted to see the kids and it worked out, great. If not, then so be it. I'd see them next time.
Now, your wife testified regarding the night before you returned yourself in.
Yes.
And she mentioned that you went to a Starbucks. Did you meet her at the Starbucks?
Yes. My son, Jack, expressly wanted me to pick him up at his school in Buckhead that Wednesday and Thursday to try to get as much time together as we could. And I certainly complied with that and wanted to spend time with him. That Thursday, we went for an early dinner. I took him to the Longhorn Steakhouse in Kennesaw off of Barrett Parkway. We finished kind of early. We walked around the REI sporting goods store because we both enjoyed outdoor things together.
Jack, these have become very, very non-responsive. I just ask that he answer the question and not go beyond that.
Mr. Merritt, you need to confine your responses to the questions that are asked. If you don't understand the question, ask that it be clarified.
Yes, Your Honor.
So when you met at Starbucks, were you already with Jack?
Yes,
And when your wife arrived, did she have a meal with her?
she did.
Was there any animosity between any of you?
No.
And let me go back for a moment. By this time, you were in the process of a divorce. I
Yes.
heard your wife mention about an incident. She says if you pushed her down. While you were out on bond, did you ever push your wife down?
Absolutely not.
So let's turn your attention to February 1st.
Okay.
That morning, you go to your daughter's doctor appointment?
I did. Janine had told me about a pediatric neurologist appointment that my daughter had about, it was early. I think it was 8 a.m., maybe even a little bit before.
And at that point in time, were you still on curfew?
I was.
So what time were you able to leave the house?
I could not leave a second before 8 a.m.
And the doctor's appointment, where was it?
Sandy Springs.
So what's the route you would take to get there from Planet Road?
Well, really, the only way to go would be to leave the neighborhood, make a left out of the neighborhood, get back to Hugh Howell, get on 78 to 285.
Now, did you get there on time?
It would be impossible to get there on time, but I got there as soon as I could.
And were there any problems between you and your wife when you got there?
No,
And did you get a chance to see me?
I did. They were already seated with the doctor. I walked in, said hello to everybody, gave me a hug, and sat down and listened to what the doctor had to say.
Now turn your attention to Mr. Jeffco. What's your relationship with Mr. Jeffco?
Mike is technically some degree of a cousin, but we come from a large family where, we don't really get into all that. And I knew Mike my whole life, and we were close.
And was there understanding for Mike to originally take you to jail?
Yes, I believe Tuesday or Wednesday that week, my mother and I decided that it would probably be best at that time when we had the discussion that Mike come and take my mother take me to the Cobb County Jail.
Now, is it that your mother didn't know how to get there?
No, my mother had been to the Cobb County Jail plenty to visit me and to go arrange the bond.
So, what caused things to change with that plan? Mr. Jeffco did.
Right. Thursday night, after I got back from seeing the children, my mother and I were talking, and we just felt like it was a private family matter, an intimate family matter. Even though Mike was family, it was something that she and I wanted to share and handle. That was really all there was to it. We didn't want to inconvenience him.
So did you ask your mother to call Mike off?
We both decided that it wasn't necessary for him to be there.
And why is that?
Because we didn't want to inconvenience Mike, because we actually had a few things we wanted to talk about, and we just frankly didn't need anybody else's help.
So the morning of the first, what time did you get back to the house?
Oh, around 8:30, I think, somewhere in there, 8:30, 8:45.
And tell us what happened that day.
So when I left the doctor's appointment and was driving back, it was the last time that I saw Mia before I knew I had to turn myself in later in the day. Mia was my baby girl. She was my princess. So naturally, I was sad. It was a sad ride home, just like the night before after saying goodbye to Jack. When I walked into the way that you got back into my mother's house is that I would park my car in the driveway. Her car was in the garage. If the garage door wasn't open, I'd open it and walk through the garage door into the kitchen. So I walked into the kitchen. I'm sorry?
How would you open the garage door?
The garage door opener.
Did you have a separate garage door, or was it on the panel on the door?
No, it was in my car. Yeah.
So once you opened the garage door,
I went inside, and it had been obvious that I was upset. I had tears in my eyes, and she just came over and hugged me. She knew why I was sad about saying goodbye to my children.
and then what happened later that day?
Well, shortly thereafter, she sent Mike the text saying that things aren't so good here. And that's exactly what it was about. It was just not a happy day. I mean, I was about to go away to prison for possibly 15 years. So it was a private time. There was no yelling or screaming. And I sent him a similar text, and that was that. So after those texts were sent, I started to go through some of my stuff and sort through some of my personal effects. And my mother and I, oddly enough, I had been so busy spending time with the kids and doing other things, she and I hadn't had a discussion about how to organize my clothes or what maybe to sell or any of that kind of basic housekeeping type of stuff. Those were things we needed to talk about. That's what we mentioned in the text when we said we need to discuss things. That's it.
Now, was there a plan for y'all to have lunch together?
Yes, my mother was a great cook, fantastic cook, and she was going to make spaghetti.
So did she start preparations for lunch?
Yes, she did.
And then what happened?
It was, the plan was we were going to eat around 1 o'clock so that we could be on the road by 2, no later than 2:30. It was, I believe, Super Bowl weekend, Friday afternoon traffic, a bunch of stuff going on in Atlanta. And, obviously we don't want to be late to the jail, given the importance of me being on time. I was walking from the kitchen. I had just left the kitchen from keeping her company while she was making the spaghetti when I heard a very loud knock at the front door. We weren't expecting any visitors. So I went to the front door and I opened it. And there were 2 individuals there, 2 men, and they both were pointing pistols at me. And they told me to let them in.
So what'd you do?
I let them in. I had never seen these guys before, and they were pointing pistols at me, so I let them in. I let them in. They shut the door. About this time, my mother came to the foyer where I was standing with these 2 individuals, and they said, head to the basement and don't say an effing word.
So did you go to the basement?
The taller of the individuals, he was older, probably in his 50s, about 6 feet, athletically built, walked past me, put the gun at my mother's lower back, and she started to head towards the stairway to the basement. The fact they said head to the basement led me to think they knew we had a basement and had cased the house before. The younger of the men, he's probably about 5'8", 5'9", shoulder-length brown hair, pudgy. He put his gun on my back and we followed them. She opened the stair door to the basement, flicked on the light. It was a two-step process to get down those stairs. You had 4 or 5 steps that went down, there's a landing, and then you make the turn, and there's the longer flight of stairs. They proceeded first. My mother was crying. She was making sounds like she might be wanting to scream or shout. And as they made the turn on the landing and took those first few steps, by this point, I and the guy behind me who had the gun on my back made it to the landing. He told her to shut the F up and pushed her down the stairs.
And then what happened to your mother?
It was the worst sound I've ever heard in my life. She plunged headlong into the wall. It's a sound I can hear to this day as I'm sitting here. And I could tell that there was a dent or a hole in the wall. She was trying to get up and move around, but from my vantage point, she appeared like she couldn't get her balance.
Was your mother injured at that time?
And she certainly appeared to be. And as I moved like I was going to try to go down the stairs, the guy dug the pistol into my back and grabbed my shoulder. The gentleman who pushed her down the stairs put his pistol behind his back into the back part of his jeans. He ran down the stairs, turned the corner, and came back with the 35-pound weight that has been seen during the course of this trial.
And where did the knife come from?
Well, the knife came later. This monster took this dumbbell and proceeded to bludgeon my mother right in front of me. And she stopped moving at this point. He then told the man who had his pistol in my back to bring me down to the bottom of the stairs. They shoved me over to the tile where the dumbbell rested, and then the older guy took off up the stairs. He came back a few minutes later with the kitchen knife and proceeded to stab my mother repeatedly in front of me. I cannot believe what I was seeing. I didn't understand what would be the purpose because she wasn't moving. Why is any of this happening? It was a complete and utter nightmare.
So what did you do during this time?
There's nothing I could do. I had a pistol to my back. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had no clue who these people were or why they were doing this to us. So he stabbed her with such force that the handle broke off the knife. I didn't realize at the time that the knife was still stuck in my poor mother's face. He put the handle down on the tile across from the dumbbell. He then turned and looked at me, and he pulled out his cell phone. And he proceeded to show me a picture of my ex-wife dropping Mia off at her school, a picture of Jack being dropped off or picked up at Lovett, a picture of them all getting out of her van at their rental home in Marietta, and a picture of her either coming or going from her clinic in Vinings. And he said, and I'll never forget this as long as I live, if you say a single word, they're next. I had no doubt who they were or what next meant. And then they left.
And then, did you call the police?
No, I did not call the police.
Why not?
Because I just witnessed an unimaginable act of violence. 2 unimaginable acts of violence. And then a man coldly looked at me after he's standing over the body of my dear mother that he skewered and bludgeoned, and shows me pictures of my family. So no, I did not call the police.
How much longer did you stay there?
I stood there numb and incapable of moving for what seemed like minutes. These guys had left. I went upstairs. All I could think about was Janine and the kids and what these monsters could do. And I went and got a small backpack out of my room. I put a few clothes. I didn't pack much. Some basic toiletries. And I left.
Now, why did you take your mother's car?
I took my mother's car because it had more gas in it than my car. It had a bigger tank. And I had no idea where I was going or where I was going to end up. And it seemed to me in that state of mind that at least her car would be easier to sleep in. And that's why I took her car.
So where'd you go?
When I left her house, I went out of the neighborhood. I don't even know what time of day it was when I left, but I went out of the neighborhood. I made a right and went up, I believe it's called Rockbridge, but it becomes Five Forks Sycamore right at the DeKalb County, Gwinnett County line. And I made a left. I'm not sure if it was Arcata or Killian Hill, but up by the Kroger there, and just started heading towards 85.
Now, how much time did it take you to get to Nashville? Is that where you go? You go straight to Nashville?
No, I didn't go all the way to Nashville in one shot. No, I ended up going to the QT station at Indian Trail in 85. I stopped to get a couple bottles of water, some snacks. I only had $18 cash on me. I topped off the tank, I believe, put some gas in it, And then I proceeded towards Cobb County, towards 285, and then ultimately to 75.
Why did you cut your monitor off?
Well, the reason I cut my monitor off is I was concerned by the time I got north of Cobb County, I was within, I believe, an hour or so of when I was supposed to report. I had no idea if just by routine the monitoring people were watching me or not. So that's why I headed towards Cobb County. I didn't want to do anything that would get me involved with the police because I didn't want it to come back to hurt my family if these guys found out and thought I had said something.
Now, why did you take both phones?
For that very reason. I had every reason to believe, based on this horrific event, that these individuals had a lot of hate for me, had been following me and or my ex-wife and kids, and perhaps they had our numbers, perhaps they were the ones who had been calling and hanging up. I didn't know. I wanted to have the phones in case they had demands. If they went back to the house, I had to know what was going on. And if Janine called either myself or my mother, I wanted to know what was going on with her, that she was okay, that the kids were okay. So that's why I took both phones.
So how long did it take you to get to Nashville?
Ultimately, I probably got to Nashville. I think they're an hour behind, but I ended up in Nashville after dark. Of course, it was wintertime, so it gets dark early everywhere, but it was probably 7, 8 o'clock Central Time by the time I actually got there.
And why did you stay in Nashville?
Nashville is a big city. I had no more money to buy gas, and it seemed like a safe place to pull off and park and try to figure out what in the world was going on.
And eventually, did you get a job in Nashville?
Yes, I got a job at a bar called Betty's Bar and Grill on the west side of Nashville.
And you heard yesterday, last week, from Kelly Richardson. And how'd you meet Kelly?
I met Kelly online.
And did you start living with Kelly?
Fairly quickly, yes.
Were the two of you in a relationship?
Yes.
Did she know who you were?
No, she did not.
And why didn't you tell her?
I did not tell her because, again, in my mind, with how horrific the events of my mother's murder were, how graphic the people were capable of such insane violence, I had to believe that they would keep their word and take it out on my ex-wife and my children if anything was said. So I adopted a new identity, and I made a vow to myself that I would never reveal who I was. And there were many, many times I wanted to Kelly, but I wanted to tell her that I was accused of a murder I did not commit. But I didn't, because I didn't want to endanger her, and I didn't want to endanger Janine and the kids.
Now, Kelly, did you and Kelly ever have any problems, anything violent between the two of them?
No, absolutely not.
She was telling us that around about the date in which you got arrested, that she wanted you to move out or stay somewhere else. What was going on there?
Kelly, at the time, was a PhD student in chemistry, and she had a lot of work to do, and she needed her space. It wasn't relationship space. It was, hey, just go find somewhere else to be for a day or two so I can get my project done. That's all it was.
Now, by that time, what happened to the car?
I want to say it was the Wednesday or Thursday before I got arrested. I got arrested Monday, September 30th, 2019 in Nashville by the marshals. I want to say Thursday the 26th, I woke up. I believe Kelly was already class or at her lab, and the car was gone. Kelly lived in an attic apartment in an old house on 18th Avenue near the university, and I didn't know it, but apparently there were a lot of break-ins, and learned after the fact that the car had been broken into, and during investigation of it by the Vanderbilt police, the car got towed, and that's what ultimately led to my capture. So I woke up, walked out, the car was gone.
So did you have anywhere to stay with the car being gone?
Not right off the bat, no.
Tell us how you ended up getting arrested.
Yeah, on that Monday, I was, the weather was starting to change in Nashville. It was getting cool at night. I was walking in West Nashville in an area called Sylvan Park where Betty's was and a few other places that I knew. And there was the old Southern thrift shop, which I had bought good cheap clothes before. And I was just looking for a light jacket because I didn't have one. And as I was done browsing through the store, I didn't see one. I started to walk out, and next thing I knew, I was surrounded by 5 or 6 marshals, and my face was in the floor, looking up at them. And they told me I was under arrest.
So, Richard, getting back to February 1st.
Yes.
Did you kill your mother?
Absolutely not. I loved my mother. She stood by me. I'm not a violent person. Never laid a finger on anybody.
None further.
We'll be in recess for 10 minutes.
I don't really know.
Judge, can I ask about something totally off the record?
Sure.
I'm not sure if you were in the email train between myself, Mr. Pines, and Mr. Cross.
No. About?
What's the young man's name? Antoine Gordon.
Yes, Ms. Shaw.
And Ms. Shaw. Apparently there is a similar issue going up to the Supreme Court of Georgia. And there's email, I guess, between us and maybe Ms. Johnson asking if, because Pines is out of town that week, one day. I'm here that week, but they're asking to see if that case can be taken off the calendar while that pending related issue is being resolved in the Supreme Court of Georgia. Pretty much for the drug overdose. And apparently there's a case going up. I can forward you an email, I'm not
Yes.
sure.
Yes. Why don't you do that? And
Okay.
I'll take a look.
Okay.
Okay.
Will do.
Y'all may be seated. Ms. Potter.
Mr. Merritt, what you said happened in front of your eyes on February 1st, 2019 must have been horrifying for you.
It was.
You said that it shook you up.
Absolutely.
You were afraid for your own life?
I was so traumatized by what happened to my mother, I really wasn't worried about myself at that point.
Okay, but you were concerned for your wife and your daughter and your son?
Yes.
And you were so scared that you got out of there as fast as you could, right?
I did.
Okay. Made the decision not to turn yourself into the Cobb County Jail, right?
Correct.
And instead you cut your ankle monitor off.
Yes.
But before you even did that, you made some stops along the way. You stopped at a Kroger on... You stopped at a Kroger first, correct?
No, I didn't actually stop there.
Okay, but you stopped in the parking lot and you drove around the parking lot in the Kroger, right?
Correct, I did.
Okay, because you didn't need gas at that point because your mom's car was full enough to get you out of there. That's what you testified to, correct?
To get me most of the way there, yes.
Okay, and then you stopped at a QT in Norcross, and we saw the video of that. Do you recall?
I did.
Okay, and you were there for how long? Do you remember?
I honestly don't remember.
Okay, did you feel that you were being chased at that point?
At that point, no, I did not.
Okay, did you feel like your life was in danger at that point?
I didn't know, honestly.
Okay, so you bought waters and a candy bar.
Yes.
Okay, and then you drove around 285 West, and you took the 75 North exit, right?
Correct.
Now, tell me if I'm wrong, but your wife's practice is over in Vinings, kind of on West Paces Ferry and Paces Mill. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so you passed that exit when you got onto 75 North.
Correct.
And you did not stop to tell your wife that you had just watched your mother being killed and her life was in danger. Correct?
No, I did not.
Okay. And your son's school, Lovett, is just down the street from that. It's on West Paces Ferry. Is that right?
Yes.
And you did not make any efforts to take that exit, which is the exit before the exit to your wife's veterinarian clinic, to pick up your son from school or alert anyone that his life was in danger.
My son, I believe, was with his grandfather that day. He wasn't at school.
Okay, but you never made any phone calls to your wife? Correct?
No, I did not.
You never called Jack's school, right?
No, I did not.
You never called Mia's school, right?
No, I did not.
And so Jack was with Sal, that's your previous father-in-law. Did you ever call Sal Minicozy to let him know that you had seen this horrible event and that he and your entire family were in danger?
I didn't call any of them because the killers told me don't say a word to anyone, so I took them at their word based on what they did.
Okay, but they weren't following you, right?
I don't know if they were following me or not.
Okay. All right, so they could have very well been behind you.
It's entirely possible. I have no idea what vehicle they were in.
Okay, and a safe place to go would have been the Cobb County Jail, which you drove right past on 75 North. Is that correct?
The instructions were, and I took them at their word based on what they did to my mother, don't say a word to anyone. The last place to go would be to somewhere like the Cobb County Jail.
And why is that?
Well, you have law enforcement there. If they have people in Cobb County, they know a report. I'm more likely to say something because I'm in the safety of the jail. That made no sense to me whatsoever.
Okay, so you didn't make any calls to anybody to warn them that their lives were in danger, right?
These gentlemen told me, and I use gentlemen very sarcastically, these monsters told me, don't say a word to anyone. After what they did to my mother, I didn't say a word to anyone, without qualification.
Okay, so these monsters, do you think that they were the same people who had been casing your house starting at the beginning of January?
Well, they sure knew we had a basement right off the rip.
Okay, and how many times had people driven off around the cul-de-sac, or driven around the cul-de-sac as you testified earlier?
Suspiciously, at least 20 or 30 times by my count.
20 or 30 times? Did you ever get any of their tag numbers?
It would have been possible to run out there in the dark and get their tag numbers.
Did you ever call the police to say, oh my gosh, somebody is following me? Did you ever do that?
Actually, my mother and I did discuss it.
You discussed it, but you never called the police, and you never made a report of people casing your house or running around the cul-de-sac in their cars, right?
No, we didn't.
Did you ever talk to any of the neighbors about what was going on?
I didn't. I can't say if my mother did or not.
Okay. So you weren't concerned at this point about these people riding around in the cul-de-sac because you obviously didn't do anything to prevent it from happening in the future.
Quite the opposite, ma'am. I told my lawyer immediately when it happened, who did absolutely nothing.
Okay. All right. And you knew he did absolutely nothing.
He told me he was actually going to reach out to his contacts at the DA's office, where he used to work alongside the person who prosecuted me, as well as his contacts with law enforcement in Cobb. They all did absolutely nothing.
Okay. But did you ever call DeKalb County Police? Because that's where your mother's house was located.
No, I didn't call, and neither did my mother, to my knowledge.
Okay. And you understand that DeKalb County Police would have jurisdiction over your mother's house?
Of course they would, ma'am, but the root of the activity was all indications sourced out of Cobb County.
All right. So these two, you called them monsters, right?
Yes.
You've never seen these guys in your life?
Never.
And they were both kind of big. You said one was pudgy. What about the other one?
He was athletic and thin.
Okay. And could you describe what they were wearing?
Yes, I can.
What was that?
The athletic thin one was wearing sort of a black thermal long sleeve top and what looked like dicky khaki pants.
Okay. And what kind of gun was he holding? Could you see?
I'm not a gun guy, but it was a semi-automatic, sort of like the police have. It was not a revolver.
What color was it?
It was black.
All right. And what about the other guy? What did he look like? You said he was pudgy, but how else did he look?
He was pudgy, had shoulder-length brown hair, brown eyes, 5'8", 5'9", and he was wearing a camouflage hoodie.
Okay. Well, did he have the hoodie up?
No.
Okay, so you got a knock on the door after being followed or having people suspiciously drive around your neighborhood for several weeks, right?
Yes.
And this was the day that you were supposed to turn yourself into the jail.
Yes, it was.
And you looked out the window, right?
I did.
And you saw that there was a guy all in black, right?
I didn't say he was all in black.
A black shirt and dicky pants.
He was wearing a black top, that was it.
And a guy wearing a camouflage hoodie, right?
And blue jeans. Yeah.
And you had never seen these guys before, but you decided to answer the door.
I opened the door. We did not have a peephole in the door. It was not uncommon to just open the door. Could have been a neighbor, could have been anybody. I certainly didn't expect that in the middle of the day.
Okay. And they held you up at gunpoint?
Yes, they said, let us in now.
They didn't shoot you?
No, they didn't shoot me.
They didn't shoot your mom?
No, they did not.
In fact, is it fair to say that they killed her with the kitchen knife from her own knife block?
I believe they did, yes.
Okay. And you wrote letters while you were in custody for this offense. Is that correct?
Yes.
You wrote many, many letters to your friends and family members, correct?
Mainly family members, yes.
Okay. Specifically, you wrote letters to Janine?
Yes.
And you wrote letters to your brother, Rob?
Yes.
Okay. And you told them that it wouldn't be unlikely that your fingerprints would be on that knife, correct?
From the standpoint that we all used the knives in the kitchen, I lived in the house, it very well could be on there. I don't know.
Did you tell him any fingerprints that may exist are easily explained as the dumbbells were mine? Did you tell him that?
Yes, I did.
And I regularly use the knife in question to prepare food, correct?
Yes, I did.
And you said you worked out 3 to 4 times per month, and you were living there for 10 months, so it would not be hard to explain that evidence away if it were to appear.
Correct, because I knew what the murder weapons were because I saw the gentleman who used them, absolutely.
Okay, but you never told him anything about the 2 guys who came into the house with guns and bludgeoned your mother to death.
You really don't have that kind of capacity to write from being incarcerated. I told him the key facts.
Oh, okay. You told him the key facts that 2 guys broke into your mother's house?
I don't recall if I told him that or not.
Okay, and in fact, what you actually told him is the timing and substance of this disclosure will all make sense.
Yes, because I knew that I didn't do it, and I would have to sit here in my defense one day, absolutely.
But you never said anything to Janine about these 2 guys who were supposedly out and knew her whereabouts in any of these letters, right?
Janine wasn't reading anything I sent her.
Okay, and what about your brother? You never said, listen, these 2 guys are out, they've got photographs of our family on the phone, and you need to look into this, you need to do something and keep everyone safe.
I had absolutely no confidence that law enforcement would do anything at that point because they took out the warrant for the murder of my mother the same day they found the body and investigated nobody else.
Okay, and you did take, so you said you took your mother's car, right?
Yes.
And you took your mother's phone as well, right?
Yes, I did.
And that doesn't make really a lot of sense. Can you explain why you took your mother's phone?
I took my phone, of course, and I took her phone because of all the calls we had been getting on both my phone and her phone. I assumed that these were the same folks who had been calling us that had killed her. They might have some sort of demands. Janine might call my phone or my mother's phone if these guys made a move on her or the kids, and I wanted to know exactly what was going on. That's why I took both phones.
You've seen the phone records that the state admitted into evidence, didn't you?
Of course.
Okay, both you and you've had the opportunity to review those phone records, right?
Yes.
And there were phone calls made to both your phone and your mother's phone while you were on the run, right?
I don't recall anybody calling me while I was on my phone anyway.
Okay.
She may have received some texts. A lot of those were SMS, not necessarily phone calls.
You never picked up any phone calls to your mother's phone on February 1st, 2019, did you?
No, but if I recall correctly, the calls that came in were people in her contacts, so I had no worries that they were the ones who killed her.
Okay. And you got rid of those phones?
Yes.
You got rid of them before you even cut the ankle monitor off, or around the time that you cut the ankle monitor
Yes,
off?
I don't dispute the data or your expert.
So there was never any intent to turn them over to the police so that they could see whether anyone was after your mom or asking for demands, as you mentioned before?
No, because I took them at their word. Say nothing or this will happen to your family.
Okay. So whose idea was it to turn Mike Jeffcoat down that morning?
It was actually my mother's suggestion. She says, I don't really need Mike to come today. And I said, okay, as long as you're able to drive and get yourself back.
All right.
That was the extent of the conversation.
All right. And, but both you and she texted Mike. Are you aware of that?
Of course.
Okay.
you went to Nashville. Is that the first place you went, or did you stop anywhere else along the way?
I believe I stopped in Chattanooga to use the bathroom at a Walmart.
Okay. And you spent those entire 8 months in Nashville, right?
Yes.
All right. Let's be clear, the name you used was Mick Malvo. Where did that name come from?
The alias that I used was from New Orleans. It was a Cajun-sounding name. That's why I picked it.
All right. And you made this driver's license, State's Exhibit 82, yourself, right?
Yeah, I got the template online, yes.
Okay. And you actually had the sleeves that you put driver's licenses in, or at least the kind that you put this in your car when it was collected, right?
I printed it off and believe the business card, plastic laminates, that's what I got.
All right. And even the birth date on this is incorrect.
Yes.
All right. Because it says here that you were born on February 25th of 1980, right?
Correct.
When actually your birthday is February 23rd, 1974.
That's right.
Okay. So you subtracted 6 years on your age because you didn't want to get caught.
I did not want to get found and have my family hurt as a result. I was trying to disappear to protect them.
All right. But you did go on to a dating app and meet women on that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you didn't have any concern about putting your information out on a dating app, did you?
What information specifically?
Any of it.
Well, I wasn't putting information out there as Richard Merritt.
Okay. All right. And did you speak with a New Orleans accent to Kelly?
No.
All right. And you were never a marketing executive, right?
No, I was not.
That was just something you made up to create this new persona of Mick Malvo.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And you did not go to LSU.
No.
You were a Georgia fan.
I went to Georgia, yes. I'm a Georgia fan.
And you weren't an LSU fan.
No.
And you were not a Saints fan.
Actually, I have been a Saints fan my whole life.
Okay. But you put those stickers on your mother's car as part of this persona of Mick Malvo.
Yes, I did.
Okay. So that was part of the deception. Is that right?
I would call it protection.
All right. And you also put a stolen license plate on your mom's car.
This is true, I did.
All right. So that was part of the lie as well, because you didn't want to be found by these monsters.
Absolutely right.
Or the cops.
That would lead to the monsters, absolutely right.
Okay. And you said that you were staying with cousins in Nashville, correct?
I believe that is something I said, yes.
But that's not true either. Is it?
No, it wasn't true.
You didn't have any cousins or family in Nashville?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay. And so you didn't really have a place to stay in Nashville?
Not at first, no.
Okay, until you met Kelly.
Correct.
So you were using her for a place to live. Is that right?
I wouldn't go that far, no.
Okay. You told Kelly that you did not have any kids, correct?
That's true.
And you said you had a niece, though, with cerebral palsy.
I did.
And you never said anything about any kind of nephew, right?
No, I did not.
You said that your mom had died of leukemia. Is that a lie that you told?
That's what I told her.
Okay. And you grew your hair and beard out while you were there?
Yes.
And again, that was part of the persona of Mick Malvo, because you didn't want to get caught by these alleged monsters, right?
Yes, that's
and
true.
And you didn't want to get arrested either.
Well, that would definitely lead to compromising my family, yes.
All right. Mr. Merritt, when you originally stole money from your clients, you stole what, about $500,000, more or less, right?
Yes, correct.
And most of these clients were elderly.
Not most of them, about a third.
About a third, okay. Are you aware that the average age of the clients who are listed as your victims in the indictment is 61.2 years old?
I wasn't specifically targeting the elderly. I believe the law states that 65 and older is elder exploitation.
Okay, most of your victims were in their 60s and 70s. Is that right?
I really don't know the numbers, ma'am.
Okay, and they had been injured in car accidents and other kind of insurance claims. That's kind of the meat of the folks that you were representing and that you stole from. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you would tell them, you would settle their claims with the insurance company and not tell the clients that you had settled, right?
That's what I did.
And so you would take their money from the insurance company and keep it as your own, right?
Well, it would be put back into the firm for the most part, but yes.
Okay. And you also promised to put some money in your escrow account for certain clients, right?
Yes.
And again, you didn't put any of that money in an escrow account.
Pled to all this in January of 2018.
Okay. And you did this because the firm was in trouble.
It was, yes.
Okay.
Actually in trouble.
So, is it fair to say, Mr. Merritt, that when you're in trouble, you lie to try to get out of it?
I don't believe that's fair to say at all.
Okay. Is it fair to say that when your firm was in trouble, you deceived many of your clients, at least the 17 listed in the indictment?
That is correct. I pled to that, yes.
Okay. And is it fair to say that you deceived the people who you worked with and worked for at Betty's Grill as to your name and where you were from and who you were? Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and is it fair to say that you made up an entire story and told a lie to Kelly Richardson because that would be a convenient way for you to get what you needed at that time?
I genuinely cared for Kelly. I didn't need her for a place to stay.
Okay, and yet your entire relationship with her was a lie.
Parts of it, yes.
Okay. So is it fair to say that you have lied and deceived to get out of trouble in the past?
I don't think that's fair to say.
Okay. Okay, so the day of February 1st, 2019, these two guys came in. They killed your mother with her kitchen knife and your weight, right?
Yes, those are my weights.
And they didn't steal anything from the house.
I don't know if they did or not.
Okay, and they didn't break in. You said that you let them in yourself.
No, I'm not aware that they tried to break in before.
Okay, and they had never tried to break in prior to that.
I can't say who tried to break in at any given point.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because nobody, as far as you know, had tried to break into your house prior to that.
I'm not aware of anybody trying to break in, no.
Okay. But they did not leave a scratch on you.
They roughed me up a little bit going down the stairs, but no, they didn't.
Okay. And you were the person who they were after, right?
I'm quite certain that that was their intent when they came there, yes.
Okay. But they just let you go scot-free.
I believe when my mother started to get loud, that's when the gentleman pushed her, and then he finished her off so she wouldn't make any noise. That's what I personally think, and they didn't realize what they got into and they took off. I don't know what their real intentions were. We never got that far.
Okay. They never pulled the triggers of either of those guns?
No, they did not.
Okay. And there was no struggle that caused any furniture to tip over, right?
I don't recall any, no.
Okay. Where did they get that knife from?
I believe they got it from the butcher block in the kitchen.
Okay. I don't have anything further.
No, Judge.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to step into the jury room for just a moment, please. so you can go back to the defense table. Mr. Queen, do you have any other witnesses? I'm going to bring the jury back out, let you rest, and then I'll ask if the state has any rebuttal evidence. Do you intend to call any rebuttal witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
All right, so I'll let you all rest on the record, and then I'm going to go ahead and excuse the jury. We'll do the charge conference, and then we'll do closings in the morning.